The afternoon sun poured mercilessly over the quiet suburban cul-de-sac. Children's laughter echoed faintly in the distance, but here, on this perfectly manicured street, silence had a weight to it. A man stood by his driveway, calm but firm. His skin glistened under the heat, his tie loosened after a long day at work, his hand clutching a set of folders thick with papers. He wasn't yelling. He didn't need to. Across from him, 3 members of the Neighborhood Homeowners Association blocked his path. Their voices were sharp, their words slicing through the air like broken glass. "Sir!" one of them barked, a tall, thin woman with sunglasses perched like armor on her face. Her voice carried that sharp authority of someone used to being obeyed. "We're going to need to see your ID, right now." The man tilted his head, expression unreadable. "Why?" he asked softly. "Because," she snapped, "we don't believe you belong here." Her words hung in the air like poison. The neighbors who had gathered nearby shifted uncomfortably. A mother tugged her child closer, whispering. A retired couple lingered on their porch, watching. The moment felt heavy, ugly. The man's eyes hardened, but he didn't move. "My home," he said, gesturing at the house behind him. "My family lives here. I don't owe you an ID to stand in my own driveway." The woman folded her arms. Another HOA member, stocky with a red face, stepped forward. "If you don't comply," he said coldly, "we'll call the police. And trust me, they'll make you comply." Gasps rippled through the small crowd. A storm of judgment and suspicion brewed in the air. The man simply looked at them, his silence louder than any protest. The woman's smile sharpened. "Go ahead. Show us who you are. Or is there a reason you can't?" The implication was clear. She wasn't asking for an ID. She was questioning his right to exist in this neighborhood. The M.A.N. took a slow breath, eyes flickering toward the folders in his hand. Legal briefs, court drafts, documents that had shaped policy far beyond this suburban street. He had written laws that governed the very state they stood in. And yet, here he was, being told he didn't belong. But he didn't reveal that. Not yet. Instead, he stepped closer, voice steady, calm as steel. "You really want to see my ID?" he asked. The HOA members sneered. "Yes, now." And that was the moment. The fracture in the silence. The clash between arrogance and quiet power. Because what happened next would flip the entire neighborhood upside down. The man's name was David Carter. To the world of law, he wasn't just an attorney. He was a legislative architect. He had spent 2 decades crafting bills, drafting policies, and fighting for equal rights within state legislatures. But to this neighborhood, he was just the new guy. The black man who had moved his family into a community that didn't quite welcome outsiders. It hadn't started with this confrontation. It started weeks earlier, in small, cutting ways. The letters slipped under his door. "Your grass is half an inch too tall. Your trash cans were visible from the street. Your porch light is too bright." David kept them in a neat folder. He wasn't naive. He knew the rules were being weaponized. Other neighbors broke them daily without consequence. But he and his family were different. His wife, Angela, urged him to ignore it. "They'll get bored eventually," she whispered late at night when the house was still and heavy with tension. But David knew better. Bullies didn't stop when ignored. They escalated. And escalate they did. One morning, his teenage son walked outside to find 2 HOA members photographing the license plate of his car. They claimed it looked suspicious. Another day, his daughter was stopped at the playground. A woman demanded to know which house she lived in before letting her play. Angela cried that night, furious and humiliated. David held her, but inside, something burned. Ironically, the very statutes he had drafted were the ones they were now violating. Still, David waited. He wanted to see just how far they'd go. The breaking point came that fateful afternoon. When the HOA demanded his ID, David didn't immediately answer. Instead, he calmly set his folders on the hood of his car, as if preparing for a meeting. Neighbors whispered. Phones came out. This wasn't just a dispute anymore. It was a spectacle. The HOA president stepped forward again. Last chance, sir. Show us your ID or the police will get involved. David's lips curved into the faintest smile. All right, he said softly. You want to know who I am? He opened the folder, pulled out a single sheet of paper, stamped with the state seal, held it up for everyone to see. This, he said, is House Bill 248. You may have heard of it. Confusion flickered across their faces. I wrote it, David continued. His voice carried now, strong and deliberate. It's the bill that prevents homeowners associations from demanding identification from residents without cause. The bill that makes harassment like this illegal. The woman's sunglasses slipped down her nose. The stocky man paled. And here's the best part, David said, his words cutting through the stunned silence. That bill passed last year, which means everything you've just done, the threats, the intimidation, it's all unlawful. Gasps erupted around them. Neighbors leaned forward, whispering furiously. Phones were recording every word. The HOA president stammered. You expect us to believe... David cut him off, his voice suddenly sharp. You demanded my ID on my own property. You accused me of not belonging in my own home. And you did it publicly, in front of witnesses. That's not just harassment, that's discrimination. The woman opened her mouth, but no sound came out. David's eyes narrowed, his calm finally breaking into controlled fury. And here's what you didn't know. I wrote the law that protects me from people like you. The words struck like thunder. In that instant, the entire power dynamic shifted. The HOA members who had stood tall and defiant now looked small, cornered animals realizing the trap had snapped shut on them. But this wasn't the end. It was just the beginning. Because David wasn't done. The HOA tried to recover, but the damage was done. The crowd had turned against them. Neighbors who had been silent suddenly found their voices. He's right, one man shouted. They've been harassing him since day one. My kid saw it too, another neighbor cried. It's not fair. The HOA president tried to wave them down, but the tide had shifted. David stepped forward, every inch the lawyer now. His voice boomed with authority. You thought you could bully me into silence, but I've spent my life fighting bullies. You used your titles and your rules to intimidate families, to drive people out, to make this neighborhood yours. Well, not anymore. The woman's face twisted. You can't talk to us like... Yes, I can, David thundered, because I wrote the law that governs you. And tonight, I'll be filing a complaint with the State Housing Authority. Every violation, every discriminatory act, it's all documented. He slammed the folder shut. The sound cracked through the air like a gavel in a courtroom. The HOA members shrank back, their arrogance unraveling before everyone's eyes. Police sirens wailed in the distance. Someone had called them anyway. When the officers arrived, David greeted them calmly. Officers, he said, handing over documents. These individuals attempted to unlawfully demand my identification on private property. Under state law, that's illegal. Here's the statute. I drafted it myself. The officers blinked, stunned, then nodded slowly. The HOA members sputtered protests, but the law was clear. And in that surreal cinematic moment, the very people who had threatened to bring the law down on David were themselves exposed by it. The fallout was swift. Within weeks, the HOA president resigned. The woman with the sunglasses vanished from meetings altogether. Investigations were launched, complaints filed, reforms demanded. But more importantly, the neighborhood changed. For the first time, families who had been quiet stepped into the light. They began attending meetings, questioning rules, demanding fairness. The stranglehold of fear was broken. And at the center of it all was David. He never bragged about what he had done. He never lorded his victory over anyone. He simply kept walking his kids to the bus stop, mowing his lawn, living his life. But the whispers followed him, respectful, awed. That's the man who wrote the law. That's the man who stood up to them. One evening, as the sun dipped low, David stood on his porch, watching his children play. Angela slipped her hand into his. "You changed everything," she whispered. David shook his head. "No," he said softly. "I just reminded them of the truth." And as the sky burned gold and the neighborhood breathed easier, one fact remained unshakable. When injustice tried to strip him of his dignity, David didn't just fight back. He changed the rules of the game. Forever.